Okay, this has to be one of the wildest, most incredible stories of the 20th century. I mean, it's a story about duty, about time, and about a war that for one guy just refused to end. This is the story of the Ghost Soldier.
All right, let's set the scene. It's March 1974. The Vietnam War is winding down, the world is deep in the Cold War, and we're seeing all this new technology changing society. But way out on this remote island in the Philippines called Lubang, deep inside the jungle, there's a lone soldier who's still fighting World War II.
And that's the big question, right? How on earth is that even possible? I mean, a war that ended 29 years ago. Was this guy just completely out of his mind? Or was there something else going on, something deeper? To figure this out, we've got to rewind. We have to go back to the world that made him.
So, to get a handle on the soldier, you have to get a handle on his world. Hiroo Onoda's story, well, it starts in an imperial Japan that is almost impossible for us to imagine today. This was a nation where the emperor's will wasn't just important, it was everything. And you really have to let this sink in, because this mindset is the key to everything. We're talking about Japan in the 30s and 40s. Kids were basically taught from birth that they should be ready to die for the emperor. Surrender? Not an option. It was seen as the absolute worst thing you could do. And an order from your commander, that wasn't a suggestion, it was sacred. This code, it was the foundation for Onoda's entire life.
Now, Onoda wasn't just your average foot soldier, not by a long shot. He was handpicked for the Nakano Military School. This was the elite of the elite, and there he was trained in intelligence, spycraft, and most importantly, guerrilla warfare. They literally taught him how to survive completely on his own, how to mess with enemy supply lines, basically how to turn a jungle into his personal fortress.
And here it is. This is the moment that changes everything. In 1944, right before he's sent to Lubang Island, his CO, Major Taniguchi, gives him this one final order. And you've got to understand, this wasn't just a command. It was a promise. A promise that would lock him into his mission for the next 29 years.
Okay, so with that order burned into his brain, Onoda starts his mission on Lubang. He and a small unit of men are tasked with disrupting American forces. But, as we know, the whole world was about to change, and he was about to be forgotten.
What followed next was just this slow, tragic process of becoming completely isolated. You know, the war ends in 45. Leaflets are dropped all over the island saying, "Japan surrendered." But Onoda, his training kicked in. He just saw it as a trick, as enemy propaganda. And then his comrades started to disappear. First one surrenders, then another is killed, until by 1972, he was totally 100% alone. And it's not like people weren't trying to find him. They tried everything. They dropped leaflets, then Japanese newspapers. They even dropped photos and letters from his own family. At one point, they played a recording of his brother's voice on a loudspeaker, begging him to come home. But for Onoda, it was all just a more elaborate trick. The only thing that was real to him was that final order from his commander.
Now, it's really important to remember, this isn't just some Robinson Crusoe survival story. There's a tragic side to this for the people who actually lived on Lubang Island. Because Onoda believed he was still at war, he and his men would raid villages for food and get into fights with local police, who he thought were the enemy. And over those 29 years, about 30 Filipinos were killed.
So after all these years, after all the official search parties and government attempts failed, the person who finally makes contact isn't a soldier or a diplomat. Nope, it's a young Japanese student, an adventurer, with, let's just say, a very unique bucket list.
I'm telling you, you couldn't write this stuff. This guy's name was Norio Suzuki. He was a college dropout who just wanted to have adventures, so he makes this life goals checklist. Number 1, find a wild panda. Okay. Number 2, find the Yeti. A little ambitious. And number 3, find Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda. And what's just nuts is, he actually manages to do the last one first. So this kid, Suzuki, goes to Lubang Island, and after only 4 days of looking around in the jungle, he finds him. And he doesn't come in with guns blazing. He just walks up and says something like, "Onoda-san, the emperor and everyone in Japan are worried about you." And they actually talked. For the first time, Onoda listened. But he was still firm on one thing. I will not surrender unless I get a direct order from my commanding officer. So Suzuki heads back to Japan with this just unbelievable news. Onoda is alive, but he's stuck, completely locked in time. And they realize to end his war, they have to literally bring the past to him. The hunt was on to find the one man on Earth who could officially end Onoda's mission.
And they found him. After huge search, the Japanese government tracks down Major Taniguchi, the guy who gave that order almost 30 years ago. Well, he was now an old man, living a quiet life, working in a bookstore. And when they told him the story, he agreed. He would fly to the Philippines and fulfill that promise he made.
Can you just imagine this moment? Onoda, standing there in his worn-out, stitched-up uniform, snaps to attention and salutes. And his old commander, Major Taniguchi, formally reads him the order to stand down. Just like that, his 29-year mission was over. The war was finally, truly over for him.
So Onoda goes back to Japan, and he's treated like a hero. I mean, to many, he was like a living samurai, this perfect example of the old code of honor and loyalty. But the Japan he came back to, it was a totally different world. And in a way, his biggest fight was just about to start.
The culture shock must have been just immense. Think about it. The militaristic imperial Japan he left behind, gone, completely gone. In its place was this peaceful, democratic country that was now an economic giant. It was filled with Western music, technology, stuff he had never even dreamed of. The very country he thought he was fighting for, it didn't exist anymore.
And, he was just overwhelmed. He couldn't really fit into this new Japan. So about a year later, he moved all the way to Brazil and became a cattle rancher. But his connection to Lubang wasn't quite finished. Years later, in 1996, he actually went back to that island, the place that took 30 years of his life, and he donated money to a local school, kind of like a way of making peace.
So in the end, we're left with this massive question. I mean, Hiroo Onoda was a man of unbelievable will, of absolute loyalty. He did exactly what he was told. But his story makes you wonder, what is the real cost of a promise? What does duty mean when the entire world you made that promise to has completely disappeared? It's just an incredible story that really makes